Welcome to the Washdown podcast, and this will be episode 147. Tonight's guest is Ronnie Doumitt, and Ronnie is a 20-year veteran of law enforcement, and he is the founder and president of ATC, which is Answering the Call. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we get into what it is about and what they do there. So, yeah, enjoy this episode. It was great. ATC is a fantastic organization. I can't recommend them enough. So we'll put all the links in the description and the bio and all that stuff. Strongly recommend and, consider donating. So here is the Washdown Podcast, episode 147 with Ronnie Doumitt of Answering the Call.
All crews stand by for emergency traffic. All crews stand by for emergency traffic.
That's the unit with the mayday. Go ahead with your traffic.
Yeah.
Once you motherfuckers step in the realm, it's game on.
Hey, that's why I brought a knife. I got to protect myself. I never know.
Oh, shit. I just realized I'm on the black man's across from the cop.
That's right, man. That's right.
You're already at a
He
disadvantage.
is way disadvantaged. Hands up, don't
My
shoot.
hoodie's white. Come on now. Oh, man. You got to love it. Well, Ronnie,
Yeah.
thank you for coming on, brother. Welcome to the Washdown
Yeah, thanks
Podcast.
for
How are
having
you?
me. Good. Doing well.
So, obviously, I've had firsthand experience with your organization, Answering the Call. It's absolutely phenomenal. But I'm curious, who is the Ronnie before we ever even get to Answering the Call? Who is Ronnie?
Yeah, Ronnie's the normal guy from Kansas City. I actually grew up in Independence, Truman High School grad, and trying to find my way in life as a graduate from high school and going to college. And my brother was serving in the military overseas as an MP, and he said, "Hey, man, when I get home, let's go be cops together." And I said, "Let's do it." But that's truly, honestly,
They really
man.
had a movie about that.
I was
Let's
literally
be cops.
I know, right? I was literally working at Hallmark Cards, going to Park University, and next thing I know, I'm in the police academy, and that was 2000, and graduated in 2000, right at the end of 2000, and 2001, October of, I got hired on with Lee Summit. Started my career there. Spent my entire career there, honestly. Worked my way up. Narcotics was something that I just really enjoyed doing. I enjoyed it on the street, working patrol. Everybody had their niche in a patrol setting, be it stolen autos or burglaries, follow-ups, things of that nature, and mine was just, I guess they call it the gift of gab, and you could just talk to people. And I grew up in Independence, so back then I remember in high school, seeing sheets of acid, believe it or not, in the high schools, and I was like, man, this, and had friends and friends of friends, and seeing people that were sometimes addicted to narcotics back in those days, and it was just kind of something that when I got in a patrol setting, I thought, this is something that I want to do my part in trying to remove from the street the best I could. And the trickle-down effect of that is, this can potentially get into a child's hands, or these parents aren't maybe parenting the best because they're on these narcotics. So it was a knack, it was a niche, it was something that I enjoyed doing. So I was in patrol for 5.5 years and working with our drug unit, working the drug task force. And then a spot came open in our special investigations unit, which was our drug unit at Lee Summit in 2007. Put in for it, got it. And that's where I spent the majority of my career. I spent 14 years in narcotics. The last 4 years of my narcotics career, I went to the Jackson County Drug Task Force and truly enjoyed the impact that you could make in that setting. As a county as a whole, almost nationwide, to be honest with you. Some of the cases we were working were huge nationwide cases, being sworn in by the feds, so you could go to Oklahoma and Kansas and things of that nature to kind of go where your case took you. And that's how I got this whole thing started, to be honest with you. In 2015, it was April of 2015. It was a Thursday morning. And one of my colleagues, Detective Josh Ward, we got wind that he was at the hospital, ill, sick, not feeling well. And same as your industry as mine, we start poking fun and making fun of him, like, what'd he do, stub his toe type of thing. And then we got word that he was being rushed via ambulance by our fire guys from St. Luke's east to St. Luke's on the Plaza. And then we got concerned. And I reached out to his wife, Melissa. Didn't know her very well. Saw her around the department. Josh and I were close enough friends that, I knew his love for family. I knew he and I were a lot the same. He had a couple kids. I had a child and one on the way. And I knew how much overtime and off duty he worked, kind of keep the family afloat financially. His wife volunteered her time at Prodeo, which is a nonprofit in Lee Summit for youth. And so I was a little concerned. I'm like, well, gosh, if he's being rushed from one hospital to another, something serious is going on. And let's just reach out to Melissa and say, hey, do you need help with anything with the kids? And she messaged me straight back and was like, Josh has been rushed to emergency surgery. It doesn't look good. So I freaked out and jumped in my take home and rushed down there. And quite honestly, what that did that day really was the start of a 4-month battle for his life. And one that us as a department, as long as I had been there, had never seen before. We didn't really know what it was going to look like. I knew that Josh had 2 twin daughters and a almost 1-year-old at home, single income family. That's pretty common in our 2 industries, especially with the hours you work, So Melissa, really, I was all she had. We were sitting in the OR waiting room. She didn't have any family except for Josh's dad in Kansas City. I went up to ICU with her in the waiting room, and we met with the surgeon. And the surgeon's like, look, we don't know exactly what he's fighting as far as virus. He hasn't been completely diagnosed yet. We know it's a flesh-eating bacteria. We just don't know what strain. So we don't know how to attack it just yet. But this could go anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 months. And that was terrifying to hear, to be honest. So the next morning, this was Friday morning, she calls me and she's like, hey, he's being rushed back into emergency surgery. I rush back down there. The surgeon comes out, Dr. Scott Segraves comes out and finds me and had gotten wind that I was there, came and found me. And he's like, hey, just so you know, the department knows, Josh is not going to survive the surgery he's currently in right now. This man had been in a surgeon for 33 plus years, all over the continental United States. And he's told me that he had never seen anyone that sick before from this type of illness. And that where he's at right now, he's just not going to survive. So we started planning a funeral. I called everyone under the sun that day. It was a Friday morning before Melissa even got to the hospital. I didn't want her to know. I didn't know how to tell her that. How do you tell a spouse that? That has to go home and tell their children that. So the chief shows up, and thankfully my good close friend who was our lead chaplain at the police department, Dave Morris, showed up, and sergeant and captains and everybody rank and file that was in our division showed up, and we kind of kumbaya'd it. And everybody was like, what do you think? And I said, I don't think she needs to know. I'm a man of faith. I very much adamantly believe in the power of prayer. And I believed at that very moment, to be honest with you, that if Melissa believed in her heart that Josh was going to survive that surgery he was currently in, I just knew he would. I don't really know how else to put it to you. So we sat there for 3 painstaking hours in that OR waiting room. All of us knew what the surgeon had told me, what modern science at that time was telling us. And it was gut-wrenching. Every time this little sweet nurse would come out, she was the one that was kind of updating all the folks in the waiting room of their loved one in the surgery that they were currently in, and making them aware where they were at. And every time she would come out, she was a nun too, sweet little heart of a lady. Every time she would come out, my stomach would drop, because I just knew I really thought we were next. She was gonna come over and say, I'm sorry to tell you this, but she came out. She's like, hey, your husband's in recovery. Yeah. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. I mean, something told me. I knew it. I knew it in every fiber I had in my body that if Melissa believed it, he was going to survive it. And he did. And then he survived the next one. He survived the next one. He survived the next one. And my chief, we knew this was going to be a long road. We did. We were planning a funeral. It was touch and go. There was a lot of emergency surgeries. There was a lot of Josh not laying on the operating table and his body just giving out, and them having to revive him and get him back up to ICU and get him stable. His body was extremely weak. I had never seen anything like necrotizing fasciitis is what the final diagnosis was.
It's so wicked.
Man, it was terrible. And so my chief reassigned me from my caseload to the kids, to Melissa and the kids, and that was my job, was to step in and make sure their needs were met. Got to a point where this was receiving national recognition. People all over the country were starting to hear about this story, and I would pick Melissa up every single day, and we'd go to the hospital, and we'd sit there 8, 10, 12 hours until she was ready to go home. We sat in that hospital. And a lot of that was just sitting there watching Josh and listening to him breathe. He was in a medically induced coma. And I'll be honest with you, Jamie, when I was sitting there, I put myself in that bed, and I put my wife at the foot of it. And I felt like if I am the one laying in that bed and my wife is sitting here and my kids are at home like Josh's were, somebody better damn well step in while I am completely out of it, right? I mean, I'm in a medically induced coma, and take care of my family.
Take me through your mindset, because you talked about all you've done for your department, and obviously being federalized and like pretty cool work.
Oh yeah,
like
it was amazing.
TV show level shit we're talking about here. Like you're running up here all the time.
Yeah.
Now we're putting you bedside, watching somebody on a vent not do anything, be an emotional support. What's that transition like?
Well, I had never been in it before. I didn't really know. It was a complete transition from working casework, and like you said, having 150 cops out there bringing work to your front door every single day, right? Because that was the size of our department and still is. It was a lot. It was a transition. I mean, I had a wife at home. I had a 3.5-year-old, and my wife's pregnant with my daughter. So there was a lot going on in my own household. There was a lot going on at work. I credit my chief and the others within our rank and file that made that decision to appoint somebody from our department to that role, to step into Melissa and the kids' lives and make sure their needs were met. Emotionally, it wreaked havoc on me, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't realize the impact until probably years later, to be honest with you, until I met, I don't know if you know Dr. Jenny Prohaska. Mm-hmm. She's amazing. We were getting into peer support, and I was on the peer support team, and I was going through her training through our department. And she came up to me and she's like, we were talking about Josh and this and that. She's like, hey, you're kind of all jacked up. You need to actually come to my office and make an appointment. I'm like, God dang, am I that bad, doc? You know? My wife would probably be able to contest to that a little bit more than me. I think she probably saw some things that I didn't, you don't even recognize it in yourself sometimes, maybe guys or gals that I worked with did at the time. I felt like I kept it together pretty good for the 4 months Josh was in the hospital. I felt like it was a brand new mission to me, right? Like this was one that I was not going to allow to fail. I knew Josh well enough. I knew his heart. I knew our friendship and our love for one another. I knew if I was the one laying there and Josh was assigned to my family wouldn't fail. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how to keep them from not failing. I knew that if I was laying there, the biggest need was probably going to be a financial one early on. I really did, especially with being their situation was a single income family. And I knew the amount of overtime and off duty that Josh worked to pay the bills. And so that was immediate to me to make sure that if he survived this, that he woke when he awakes, if he awoke, to make sure that he still had a home to return to. That was my big thing, to make sure that they were up to date on their bills. So Melissa and I had to sit down and go through that difficult conversation. Let's look at your bills one morning before we went to the hospital. And, look, this woman is thrust into single motherhood in a blink of an eye.
And not just single as in doing all herself, single plus still worrying about her husband. She doesn't have the luxury of just only doing it
We're
herself.
making 8, 10, 12 hours a day. We're making life and death. And I say we because, we're sitting there shoulder to shoulder, making life and death decisions for her own husband. It was impactful. How she held it together. She's still one of the strongest humans I've ever met in my life. And she was incredible through that whole process. But what my job was to make sure that they just didn't fail. And I knew Josh would do the same for me. So we actually started to fundraise. The word was getting out. I was the point of contact from our PIO division to the community, emails, phone calls. I was receiving donations from around this country, Vermont, Maryland, Minnesota. It was unbelievable. It was incredible to me. It was inspiring to me. And I knew when that started, I knew that we had something. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I was like, man, there's a community out there that loves our profession, that loves this family for the sole reason of who he is and what he's done for this community for the last 10 years of his life.
And when was that?
It was 2015.
So we're not in the best time for law enforcement really either.
If you remember, that's Ferguson. And on the other side of the state, there was an entire city, if not multiple cities, that were burning. And there was a lot of situations, right? A lot of problems going on. It was starting to trickle over to this side of the state a little bit. And, a lot of the hands up, don't shoot type of thing was happening. And it was a contentious moment.
There would have been just as many people would have praised him if he would have died. The stupid, sick reality that it is. That's what you're up against. And to know that there's that much still national support has got to be.
Man, that's what it was. I tried to focus on the positive out of it. And that's what I really started to focus on. Because you can go down that rabbit hole, right? And you can get really frustrated and mad. But what I saw coming in and what was happening was a support of my brother and his family when I didn't really know if we were going to get any support. But we did. This city was unbelievable. The amount of small businesses, mom and pop owned shops that were reaching out to me, wanting to do fundraisers for Josh and his family. And one of the big things that really frustrated me was a good friend of mine, who's my CPA, Brett Reinhard, and I were sitting down and we were discussing things. And he said, Ron, you really need to find a nonprofit here in Kansas City that will open up a fund for you for fundraising purposes. And I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. I understand where you're going with that, because if you have a 501c3 attached to a situation, businesses are going to get involved. People are going to donate large donations because you have a 501c3. It's a tax credit, right? And every nonprofit that I reached out to just didn't have the ability to do that, or they just didn't want to. I was very frustrated. So
fuck you, I'll do it myself.
That's exactly what happened, man. We just said, screw it. This was June of. Josh was, by the grace of God, to be honest with you, Josh awoke. He survived 27 surgeries in 4 months. The man lost 60 to 68% of his upper body mass. I'm talking pectoral muscles, and his rib cage were literally open, where they had to do a muscle flap, where they took his abdominal muscle and flapped it over his rib cage. He lost his thumb on his left hand, his finger on his trigger finger. He lost his profession over it, unfortunately, but he was alive, and he was able to hug his wife again and continue to be a father. Probably one of the toughest individuals I've ever met. The thing that I noticed early on, and I'll never forget this, is when Josh woke up, he saw two people. Thank God he saw Melissa first, right? His beautiful wife.
Not your ugly ass.
And not my ugly ass. But I was the second guy. And I think what happened was Melissa got drug away by a doctor or nurse or somebody, and they were kind of explaining the situation. He looked at me, and, he's kind of, eyes are glossed over. And he's like, man, it's hard to say. This was 6 weeks later, bud. 6 weeks of your life has been gone. But we've got you. Could you imagine waking up and not knowing for the last 6 weeks, how's my family? Is my wife, are my kids okay? Is my house still there? What have I been doing? I couldn't even put myself in his shoes, but I was able to tell him, because of the amount of money we were able to bring in that short period of time, that you and your family are going to be taken care of financially. And man, I've seen this multiple times in the 8 years I've run my foundation. A little light switch went off in him. He flipped that switch. And he was like, okay, get me the fuck out of this place. I'm ready to rock and roll. What do I have to do? You're telling me that I don't have to go work overtime and off duty right now? Because I can't. But my family's going to be taken care of financially.
Because he would have showed up in a hospital room
somehow,
with a gun belt
on. You know, that's what guys do in our industry, right? They just want to get back to work. They don't want to be laying in a hospital bed or a bedroom. They want to be working. That's what we do. That's what God put us on this planet to do, is serve, protect our community. But he was able to be selfish. For once in his life, Josh was able to really just focus on himself, because that's what he knew it was going to take to get him out of there. From 6 weeks prior, we were planning a funeral, to now Josh is awake and he's ready to rock and roll and get out of that hospital bed. It was awesome. It was badass. So we founded the 501c3, answering the call right then and there in June that year. And you had this dumbass detective cop trying to figure things out.
Obviously, you founded it. What are your next steps? What's the growth of that agency look like to what it is today?
Oh, man, huge. I mean, it was the first 2 years, if I'm honest with you, the first 2 years, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I founded a board. I dropped to my knees and asked the good Lord above to give me names, and he gave me 5 names, and I called every single one of them, and they all said yes. And so they jumped on this machine with me. But I didn't really know what to do. I knew when we had a catastrophic situation, Josh's situation, that people just came to me because of who he was and the situation he was going through. But as far as just fundraising, grassroots, I guess, if you will, I didn't really know how to do that, if I'm really honest with you. And then if you remember, I believe it's 2017, Tom Wagstaff with Independence was shot in the head during a home invasion. And I was asked by peer support to go up to the hospital. I was already headed up there anyhow. I was actually on the range shooting when Tom got shot. But I had known Tom from my time on the SWAT team, and he was on their TAC team as well. So I wanted to be there. It was just one of those situations where I just felt driven to go. And so I just went up there to kind of be there for the guys and lend support and let them know I was here if they needed anything. And my good friend, who is just, man, he's one of the most amazing men I've ever met. Friend, cop, detective, Luis Virgil was there. Luis is just one of those guys that just everybody falls back on. He's got these big shoulders, and he's able to take on a ton of emotion support and physical support. And he's just one of those guys that a lot of people ask for help. And he was there, and I saw him, and he said, "Hey, Ronnie, I'll be right back. I'm going to a meeting with the chief and command staff." And I said, "Well, what do you got going on?" He's like, "Well, we're trying to figure out where we're going to open this fund and how we're going to open this fund. We're going to have to do all this fundraising." I was like, ding, 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 light bulb. There it was. The same thing that I needed 2 years prior was this fund to open for fundraising purposes. And I'm like, I got it. He's like, "What do you mean?" I started telling him about us and who we were, and terrible at marketing. So people even, within 5 minutes of my front door didn't even know who we were and what we were doing. And I said, "We've got an account at the Public Safety Credit Union. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Let me open an account for you. Funnel everything right into it. Tell the community who we are and what we're doing." And man, it took off. It really, honestly, I hate to say it. Disasters, catastrophes, injuries put us on the map, because that's who we are and what we do. We get involved with the worst that our first responder community has to deal with, right? We get involved in a different respect than other foundations around do. There's a need for each and every single one of them, right? Line of duty death or the mental side of it. But nobody was stepping into our first responders' lives in our two industries after a catastrophic, severe injury or a rare and aggressive illness. These men and women, the men and women you work with and the men and women I worked with were out there grinding every single day away from our families, Ask nothing of the community other than just let us serve you. Well, who steps in? What resources are out there for these folks when they get shot in the head or burn up in a house fire? You know, everybody's like, hey, God bless, take care. Hope you can come back to work when you can.
Thoughts and prayers.
And I'll take all the prayers and I'll take all your thoughts, but we need work. We need action right here, right now. This family cannot suffer financially. You know, you take the stress of our two professions, right? And not just the stress in us, but the stress that it puts on our families. And then you take a knock at the door at 3 a.m., right? Because that's happened recently a lot. Happened 8 times last year to Kansas City Metro. We had 8 officers shot in Kansas City in 2023, right? 8 spouses got knocks on their doors. Just on the police side. Sorry to tell you, but I need you to get in a car. I need you to go to the hospital with me right now. Who steps in and takes care of them? Prior to 2015, there were 0 resources, Jamie. When Josh got sick, I was waiting for all these people to come when they heard about this story and say, hey, we're here to help. Financially, let's open a fund for them. There was nothing. So, like you said, fuck it. I'll do it myself. And that's what we did. I got sick and tired over 20 plus years of my life watching my friends suffer at no fault of their own, simply going out and doing their job. Simply going out away from the birthdays and away from the anniversaries and away from the Christmases and the Easters, selflessly serving this community. And then they take a round to the head, and we got people that are showing up and, like you said, standing in front of a podium in front of a hospital and saying, we support our men and women in blue, right? And then they go home.
It's a really great political line.
Then they go home. Well, what about the wife and kids? What about the husband and the kids? There's nothing. So we get involved immediately. As soon as I hear about it, 12 to 24 hours of the incident and or diagnosis, you know yourself, we get involved. And there is no red tape. There's none of that bullshit to deal with. The last thing this poor spouse needs to do is sit in a hospital room with her, I'll just say husband, right?
Filling out a bunch of fucking forms.
Opening up a damn laptop and putting her life history on 6 different pages.
Let's see if you qualify for our services.
Right. Let's see. You know what?
Well, you don't qualify for that, but you get a handshake and a slap on the butt.
Yeah,
Congrats,
man.
guys.
I mean, it's just, man, I've had
it's almost infuriating. And I can even tell, like, just I'm getting mad about it again because we've all, Jeremy, you and me, we've lived that. We've seen it. And we've just been so damn frustrated about the talking heads and the bulletin board material and you know, the grandstanding and the photos. But what is fucking getting done?
Yeah, man. I mean, honestly, it's a misconception in this community. And when the community hears about it, they are pissed. I'm going to speak at the Lee Summit Rotary this week, Friday. And then next week I go and speak out in Lenexa. And I'm telling you, each and every single person in that room, when I describe our officers and our firefighters out there doing what they do every single day.
Your neighbors, your own neighbors.
Your coaches, your neighbors, the guy that's out and the gal that's out throwing the football with the kids, that's going out and putting their lives on that, literally will step in front of you and your family to take that bullet to the head or run into a house fire that you had to get out of to go save your loved ones. If something happens for them that they're out, you know, putting their own life on the line, if something happens catastrophically to them and their families are at home, there's nothing. There's 0 resources through our state, our county, or our cities. Nothing. They swear an oath to protect and serve, sometimes, and pay the ultimate sacrifice.
You would, and what's sad is you'd almost be better off if you were dead. Financially.
Your family will be.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to get into specifics, but I mean, we've seen that where, you know, the guys that just get hurt or the people that just get hurt and don't die, or they get thrown by the wayside.
And then what happens is you see that, and I was talking about the stress, right? You talk about the stress of the job in and of itself. And what I didn't realize when I was a young single cop and I was, you know, dating my wife and fiancés, and then we started having kids, I didn't realize the stress trickled down to my family until later in my career. But you take that and you compile it with a severe catastrophic injury or illness, and now the spouse is having to take off work, and now the spouse can't pay their bills. And then you get the first responder to finally get out of the hospital and come home, and now they become the caretaker, right? And now this stress is just mounting and it's building and it's building. And then you have a breakdown of family. And then we see what we're seeing in our two industries with suicide. So my big thing is keeping family together. And I believe, and I've seen it over the 8 years, and the $850,000 we've donated in 8 years, is the stress level in these folks when they're sitting in a hospital room and their loved one shot. That happened 8 times last year in Kansas City. If I can just get there quickly, we can alleviate that financial stress almost immediately. And there's just this deep breath that they can take. They got a little bit of room. We got some breathing room here. I'm going to pay your mortgage for the next 5 months. You don't have to worry about it. Take care of yourself. Walked into a hospital of a female officer that from Trenton, Missouri, that was shot. I want to say it was 4 years ago. She was life flighted up to Kansas City, and I found out where she was at, and I went up there with a representative from FOP 50. Lodge 50 took me up there. Walked in, she was by herself. We've come to find out, single mom, 25 years old, of a 5-year-old little girl. Shot in the abdomen. Handed her my envelope, did my song and dance, told her who we were, and her head, she opened the check. Her head went straight back against the bed, the pillow, and just these huge crocodile tears were going down her face, right? And I just stood there for a minute, and I knew these tears weren't pain. She wasn't in any pain. It was relief. She told me right before I walked in that door that since she got to the hospital, her biggest worry and her biggest concern was paying her mortgage. How am I going to pay my mortgage now? She was working overtime away from her daughter just to pay her mortgage.
You glossed over $850,000 in 8 years, Ronnie. That's not a $5 check. That's not a one-time mortgage payment. We're talking thousands and tens of thousands of dollars that you're assisting these families with. It's just not a small feat, buddy.
Yeah, man. Well, before our foundation was put into place, and one of our guys in our own department or a family member of theirs would get sick or ill or injured, you pass the hat around the industry, right? You pass the hat around the firehouse, around our department. You come up with $200, $300, $400, $500, and you hand it over to the spouse. You're like, I hope this helps.
And it's all good intention.
It's a great intention, but you got guys that are having to work overtime and off duty to pay their own bills. They can't dig into those deep pockets, right? So what we do is we make an impact. I'm going to walk in to this hospital room, or I'm going to show up at this department and I'm going to hand this check off to this commander, and they're going to be able to go over to this family has a loved one that's just been shot or burned up in a house fire, grass fire, whatever it may be, or fighting an illness, and say, quite honestly, for the next 3 to 4 or 5 months, your bills are paid, your mortgage is covered. Focus on yourself. The time you're going to have to take off work, the wear and tear back and forth from Mayo Clinic. We fly guys to Mayo if need to. We take their spouse with them if they need to go. People don't realize the wear and tear and the having to eat out 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because Melissa and I did that every single day. It crushes your pocketbook. And when you're not making as much, let's be honest, our two industries don't pay their bills off their hourly rate, at least for the first 8 to 10 years, right? That's why firefighters always have secondary jobs, or they take up an extra shift. Police officers work off duty and overtime. They don't bitch or complain about it, but that's where your hourly rate actually pays your bills. You take that away from them for an extended period of time, they will be crushed financially. And then you have the family breakdown. So yeah, we $850,000 in 8 years, and this is our 9th year this June.
That's huge.
So it's unbelievable, man. And quite honestly, it's not me. It's this community of Kansas City. They love it. And it's the misconception because they truly believe that there's things in place. They feel, at least from what they tell me, that the millions and billions of dollars of tax revenue, there should be something in place.
There should be.
There should be something in place for our men and women, the constituents of these government officials, right? That if something should happen, let's just say even on duty, Tom Wagstaff shot in the head, nothing from the state. Getting a 40-hour week check. God bless, take care, but let's really make an impact. I'll take all the prayers. The only reason Tom's alive is because of prayer. I know it. I just know it. And we were able to financially support his family, and Independence and Luis Virgil and Chief and everyone else did an amazing job. And Wendy Winans, they did an amazing job of getting involved with the Wagstaff family and getting his story out to the community. And the amount of events that they put on and the community coming to him, I mean, it was all inspiring, to be honest with you. It was just incredible.
2 days ago, friend of the show, we've had him on at least once, if not a couple times. Good friend of mine, Joe Gwynn, was in his motorcycle wreck. Went to go get groceries. Got hit, was in the hospital with a broken neck for 2 months. And I remember some people reached out and said, hey, like, this organization answering the call is phenomenal. Like, they can help. And I remember looking back at our messages when you and I had first talked, and that family was guaranteed money 8 hours after that incident.
Yeah, I don't have a huge, I don't put a lot on my board members. We have 7 sitting board members. I don't ask a whole lot of them. The one thing that I ask, and the one thing that we're all in agreement upon, is when we have a first responder in need, and as soon as we hear about it, we put a vote out to the board to decide A, if we want to donate, and B, the amount. Typically $5,000 or $10,000. We take a lot of things into consideration, right? But I want that answer to that family, to that department, within 10 to 15 minutes after they reach out to me. Because I want them to be able to relay that to the spouse or to the first responder themselves if they're cognizant that, look, there's a substantial amount of money coming your way. And to be honest with you, that's not a one-time donation. If the family's still struggling 3 months later and the first responder's still off work, we'll step back in. We've done it. We've donated up to $20,000 to one family 4 different times in a 12-month period. So, our Kansas City officers that were shot last February, several of those guys were off for months, 6, 7, 8 months. Average about $1,500 to $2,000 a month they're losing in overtime and off duty. And one of the spouses specifically, she was a stay-at-home mom. They had 3 little kids. We needed some additional help. Here you go. Helping a Riverside officer. This story is what pisses me off. This guy served as a combat Marine in early 2000s, right? Comes home after 5 years, several different deployments over a 5-year period. Comes home, becomes a Riverside officer. Serves our community for 18 years. Fit as a fiddle. I mean, everybody that I've talked to about this guy, man, he's your typical Marine. Runs, works out, can run miles upon miles. Going up a flight of stairs one day at work, and he's out of breath, and obviously something's not right. Okay, goes to the doctor, gets diagnosed with some type of, I think they thought early on it was a type of cancer, but it's some kind of a burn pit syndrome is the best way that I can put it, because I don't know the medical term for it. Not able to go to work. I believe he was having some seizures early on. Okay, so now he's off work, and we step in, making an initial donation. He's working with the VA. That's a whole different podcast, right? For this burn pit syndrome that he was being diagnosed with. Then the guy calls me back, I don't know, after our initial donation, I think 3 months later. I actually never met him face to face. And a lot of these folks I don't. I mean, I'm the last guy they need to meet, right? They don't need one other person showing up in their life. They just need some financial assistance. So I don't have to meet these folks. But he calls me on the phone and he says, man, I'll be honest with you. I'm in a situation right now where I don't have money coming in either way. I'm off work on long-term disability, and my long-term disability isn't paying me like it should right now, and I can't make my mortgage. How shitty is that? This guy serves our country for 5 years as a combat Marine overseas, and then he comes home and he serves our country, our community right here in our own backyard. This is 20 plus years of service to country and community, and 5 months after his diagnosis, he can't even pay his mortgage. It's a problem. So that within an hour, he had a check waiting for him at one of our local branches, and he was able to go up and get it. And then Red X and some folks in their department, to their credit, got together and through us, we opened an account for him, and we were able to, with the community's assistance, again, within 2 weeks, we were able to raise $18,000. Shouldn't even be a thing. Answering the call shouldn't even have to be an organization. We shouldn't even need to be here. We shouldn't have to dip into the pockets of our community. They do it enough for themselves out through their taxes, in my opinion. Okay, I don't run a state or a county or a city, but
if we did, it would all be better. That's what I always think.
I don't know about that, buddy. I don't know about that, but yeah, man, it's extremely unfortunate. But I will tell you that the community, when they hear these stories, they are pissed. They're like, "This is a bunch of crap. Why is this even happening? Why is this even a thing? Why are these men and women not being taken care of?" Because I met a Marine last Memorial Day, and we're standing on a pontoon boat having a drink together, and he's like, "So what do you I heard about your organization. Tell me what you do." And I told him, he's like, "Why are there not resources for these men and women?" That's a great question. I get asked that all the time, and people think I have an answer for it, and I absolutely don't. I don't know. It makes no sense to me, but
Because we're cogs in a wheel.
we are, man.
That's it.
It
I
is.
mean, somebody else will be filling that seat, the next shift once you're gone.
You are a number.
And that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing all over the country, hey, people aren't stepping up to do these jobs like they used to.
I tell people that all the time. The last 2 years I was at the department, and our department's in a great position. We have great community support in Lee Summit. We really do. It's a great place to work, man. It really is. It was the toughest decision I ever made, was leaving early to do this foundation. But we did recruiting, and I was in the recruitment department. We were in the hiring department. I was in community outreach. And we went from, say in 2000, when I tested for the Lee Summit Police Department, 200 to 300 people for one testing for 3 positions. I tell people this all the time. To current day, we had 13 positions open, and we would have 7 to 10 people show up for a testing. And I tell people this. I'm like, listen, this isn't the United States military. There's no draft. These people are your neighbors. They're your coaches. They're kids getting out of high school that are volunteering to come and serve. They're following their heart. They're following what God, in my opinion, created them for: service to community, to serve God's church and take care of them. But when you can only bastardize, I'll just say, the police for so long, right? And then they're like, man, that job doesn't sound great, and you're going to pay me $50,000 a year, and I'm supposed to raise a family off of that?
And it's we don't agree with it. We don't like it, but it's the reality, especially with social media these days. I've seen it. I've seen everything from an officer injured, and you follow the news Facebook article, and there's a good chunk of the comments of people wishing that officer dead. And it's, when people read that, why would any of them want to go, sure, that career sounds great.
Sounds like a great job.
It's amazing to me. One question I have for you, Ronnie, is I've been with you now, bedside, when you deliver a check to the family of a dying man.
Yeah.
And what I love about you, and I think as a representation even more so of your organization, is how humble you are when you do it. It is not about you. It is about the person that you're there and that family that you're there. How do you, in a healthy way, detach yourself from the situation and know you're there to serve a role, and either not let it emotionally get to you in the moment, or not let it feed your ego?
So I'll tell you that I get asked that question a lot by folks in the professions because they're like, well, how do you handle all of this? Because everything that I do is really doom and gloom, right? The worst case scenario for our first responders and stepping into a family's life. But to be honest with you, Jamie, it's therapeutic for me because I saw before our organization existed how the dissolve of the family, right, would happen without any type of resources. And now I get to be that resource. Our community expects me with every damn dollar they donate to support our first responders. They expect that of me. That's my job. When I got a text message on the way over here and I'm checking into it, so I won't get into it, but there's a situation right now. We have an officer who's potentially extremely injured right now and I'm checking into it. But when I stand in front of 500 people at answering the call trivia night, and we raise $120,000. That money isn't there just to sit on and do nothing with. The community has expectations for our organization. They want these people taken care of and immediately taken care of. And that's our mission. So to me, it's therapeutic. I'm not going to lie. There's no training out there that can prepare you to stand bedside of a man who knows his fate and look his wife and 2 kids in the eyes and have 3 of his friends in that room and try to contain myself, right? It's not easy.
Because I didn't.
I know. It's not easy. But we are all they have. And that's a lot. But I also know that we're all they have, if that makes sense. They don't know that. I had a spouse of a police officer that was shot just last year. I was at the hospital. I didn't actually go in and meet the 3 officer spouses that were shot because, believe it or not, I couldn't find a parking spot. So I just handed the check off to the captain and the sergeant over that unit. But weeks later, I met some of the spouses and I met some of the police officers. And she said to me, I didn't know what I needed. You knew what I needed. I didn't know the lack of resources. I didn't know that my husband laying here for the next how many months, what that was going to look like for our family, but you already did. And number one, it was financial. And then when the beautiful thing is, and what is the coolest thing I think about our organization is I have all these small business owners that reach out to me and they say, through you, we want to be a resource to them. Unique Painting will paint their homes for free. We're doing the Unique Challenge right now, looking for a first responder or a teacher or a nurse or someone that this organization, this small family-owned business can step in and paint their home for free. It's amazing. We painted Officer Mulbauer's wife's home last year after Jim was killed, the KCPD. Liberty Car Care up in Liberty, Missouri. They're on car number 5 right now of local first responders. And I'm talking, they're taking care of bills. They're thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of maintenance and just upkeep for these folks that are in dire straits that need this. And not a bill comes. It's amazing. HVAC work, plumbing, Officer Oswald's wife. Officer Oswald was the officer killed in Fairway, Kansas last year. I keep in touch with Hannah just to be a resource, right? She called me 4 weeks ago and she said, Ronnie, my pipe broke in my basement. Within an hour, I had our AC, HVAC plumbing company over there and they won't send me a bill. It's incredible, man. The way the Kansas City community, and this is both sides of the state line, because that's who we serve. We service both sides of the state line, Kansas and Missouri. The way they support their first responders is like nothing I've ever seen. And you know, you talked about seeing an officer shot in another part of the country, and the thread on social media is negative about, man, he deserves to die or this and that.
Or my favorite, that's what they signed up for.
That's what they signed up for. But let me just say that that's the minority of people. It really is. The vast majority are our silent majority. And they support an organization here in Kansas City. And sometimes a lot of them do it quietly, anonymously. $850,000+ in 8 years, over 1.7 million fundraised. It's unbelievable. And it's something that's never been done. And it's something that shouldn't even have to exist. But that's the thing that this community they're all ears about. And that's why I think I get invited to so many local Rotaries and small BNI groups, because people want to hear about what we do and why we even have to exist. And that's I think they're just intrigued by it. And then they get really frustrated and pissed off. I was doing a presentation. It was last, I think, September. And there was about 150 people in the room. And, I don't necessarily want to sit here and have to call out my own state that I love. I love the state of Missouri. But there's no resources through our state for these men and women that, in my opinion, so that they deserve it. There's nothing through our counties or our cities, right? They're just not built that way, but maybe they should be. Maybe there needs to be some conversation had. But there was a state representative in that speaking engagement I was involved in, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Hey, I'm a state rep.
Cool story."
And he goes, I noticed that you called out the state of Missouri a little bit. Would you like to sit down and have lunch?" And to his credit, we did. 3 months later, we sat down and we had lunch, and I was very honest with him. And I told him that this conversation should have happened 30 plus years ago, but it didn't. But today's the day. Today's the day that we start the conversation of maybe allocating some money. And again, I don't run a state. I can't even imagine the magnitude of that. But today's the day that we sit down and we talk about this. We at least have a conversation.
Because your goal should be to put yourself out of business. As weird as that is to say.
I'm all in for that, man. But I will tell you this. I had a friend of mine who's become a pretty good-sized donor to us, and him and his wife both served in the military, and he said, "Ronnie," because I've had this conversation with him in my basement having a bourbon, and he said, "Ronnie, here's the deal. I love what your idea is on having the state or the counties or something there for folks to step in and it is a statewide thing, right? But you recognize there's going to be red tape. You have to answer call still has to be there. Because like we talked about a minute ago, I'm there within 12 to 24 hours of the incident. And that's where the mental health side comes in that I've recognized is when AJ was shot last year in Kansas City, AJ told me, I walked right in, I met AJ, I met Mallory, I met their two beautiful kids. And it was it was somber. I mean, this was less than 12 hours after he was shot. There's extremely unknown, right? He told me months later after they did our video, which is on our website, I called in their own words and they sit down with some videographers and they just tell their story. And he said, "Man, that was more therapeutic and that was better for my mental health than anything I've been through. You showing up at the hospital, I'm still shot to you know what. And you walking in and handing my family $5,000 to support us and support my wife and my kids, and I can be selfish and just focus on myself. It's therapeutic." And I honestly didn't even think of it that way. But I went back and I thought that's where the light bulb went off with Josh. When Josh woke from that medically induced coma, and I was able to tell him, "Hey, brother, the entire time you've been asleep, this community has been just funneling money into us to support you." And it's like a light switch, man. You and your brothers and sisters at the fire department are selfless. You go to work every single day, and the amount of lives that you save there's no way of putting a number on it. It's unmeasurable. To be selfish is a very difficult thing because you're so selfless. That's how every fiber of our body is. You call, we come, regardless of who you are. That's what I love about it. Who's going to step in and take care of you? When you're laying in that hospital bed and you're like, "I need to get up and do things. I got to take care of this family, wife, and kids." No. We're going to take care of it. My pastor said it best. "We're going to lighten your load. I'm going to carry your pack." It was beautiful. It impacted me in that sermon. And he wasn't even talking to me directly. This was a sermon he was putting on. He was talking about hiking through Yellowstone, and he was about to die. And this young other pastor was with him, took his 80-pound pack off his back and put it on himself. And he's like, And Pastor Phil's like, whoa, you can't carry that. There's no way. It's 100 and some degrees, and you're going to carry 2 packs. He's like, I'm just going to lighten the load for a little bit. It's just temporary. I'm going to give it back to you. And when my friend Tyler Smith, who's an Independence firefighter, and I just dearly love this family. Like, I dearly love them. They're young and they're courageous and they're resilient. And Tyler's on his 2nd diagnosis with a really nasty, aggressive, ugly cancer. And they've got these 2 beautiful daughters. And one of them, Brooke, is special needs, and she's wheelchair-bound, nonverbal. I mean, so much for this young family to deal with. And we've been able to step in with them within almost weeks after his initial diagnosis. And we've donated a substantial amount of money, and we will continue to until he's back on the job. But he asked me one day, he said, Ronnie, what have I done to deserve all of this help? I said, well, you go out and you serve this community for the last 10 years of your life, Tyler. How is there? There's no way of knowing the amount of lives you've saved and impacted daily. It's the least we can do as a community. The least we can do is to step in and support you. And I said, I don't want to carry your pack the rest of your life, nor do you want me to. I'm here to lighten your load. I'm here to be the conduit of the community. And I'm here, this organization is their way of funneling their $5 if they can afford it, or their $10,000 if they can afford it, to simply say thank you in your time of need, because you do it every single day.
We are, as first responders, so stubborn with our own bullshit. And, you can probably see I got the tear in my eye because this, what did I do to deserve this? It's never us. We will drive ourselves into the grave and kill ourselves before we ask for help. And somehow you found the niche to be like, tough shit, you're getting it anyway.
Tough shit, bud. I've found out where they've banked. And I go to their bank and I just deposit checks. And that's a great feeling, because then I get that text. They're like, hey, you son of a motherfucker. And they're like, I didn't. And then 3 months later, they're like, oh, damn. I really needed that. Yeah, I know. You can apologize to me now. I don't give a shit. This isn't my money. This is the community's money. This is the community's way of saying, now that we know that this is a problem and this isn't being handled anywhere else, this is our way of saying, hey, Ronnie, answering the call, organization, step in. That's why I said, I was like, this is my job. They expect this of us. You know, I was on the SWAT team for 8 years and I worked narcotics for 14. And honestly, for the vast majority of my career in law enforcement, I was on call in some form of another, right? So when that phone went off or that text message went out, you just picked up and went, right? Your bell goes off in your house, you just go. It's the same way with my phone. That phone is my bell. That phone is my pager, right? That phone is, I dated myself a little bit saying pager because we had them on the team when I first got on it. But honestly, when that thing went off, regardless of what I was doing, wherever I was at, with dinner with my wife, whatever it may have been, the community needed us and you just went. And that's exactly how I run this organization. When that phone comes in or that text message comes in or that phone call comes in from a commander that's standing on the scene of a shooting where we have officers shot, it puts me on notice, and it's time to get to work. And it's time to do what the community asks us to do. And I think the community appreciates that. I really do. And they show that. We brought in close to $400,000 last year for our organization, and we donated more than we ever have. $168,000 donated back to Kansas City first responders last year. We've never reached that number.
You've so obviously your agency, of the many problems that occur with first responders, you guys specifically go after catastrophic illness and injury. That's what's written in your bylaws.
Yes, sir.
And you have had good conversations. Because, of course, me, little optimistic me, I'm like, what about this?
Yeah.
What about that? Could you do this?
Hey, can you do that? I'm like, nope.
And speak to me a little bit, too, about how difficult it is, because there still has to be a boundary in place. You still have to be a reference and not a resource all the time. There still has to be some black and white so you can stay afloat. This can help more.
Yeah. 6-7 years ago, I met a man that a lot of us probably know. His name's John Cherry, and he runs an amazing organization called the John Cherry Foundation. He started it 30 plus years ago. And I met John in his office, And the one thing that he said to me, he said many things, but the one thing that I took away that I'll never forget is he said, don't overstretch yourself. And that was profound to me. You can't save the world and you can't help everyone. So you got to focus on the niche, right? I talked about a niche in my law enforcement career of working narcotics, but I've seen this need that was never being met. And I've seen the turmoil that it causes within a family. And then I've seen the breakdown, and I've seen the divorce, and I've seen the kids go through hell, and no fault of their own, right? So being able to provide that and being able to get involved and knowing what Jerron has done in the community, and now that we're a foundation that he supports, man, you asked, and it's extremely therapeutic for me. It really is. But you can't save the world and you can't do it all. So our bylaws do read that you have to be the first responder themselves, right? But the one thing that a resource that I've been wanting to provide, and we've been able to provide, and my phone rings a couple months ago from you with the situation that occurred here in Kansas City with one of our first responders and their child. And so what we were able to do is we weren't able to step in and donate right then and there because it's not the first responder themselves, but it's their child that's sick. And the community needs to come together, and we need to raise some resources for this family. So we were able to open that fund for them. Right now, we probably have, I think I have 16 open accounts right now for fundraising purposes for first responders in Kansas City. And it just gives the community a way, coworkers, family members, hell, folks in Iowa, right, that want to donate to this one cause, and it gives them the opportunity to do that.
You and I obviously know the difference, but to those that don't, that are listening, what's one of the difference? We see a lot of GoFundMe or website-based fundraising. Mm. How is answering the call different from some of those?
Well, I mean, every dollar you bring in to Kansas for that first responder goes to them. Now there's fees involved when a check isn't written directly to us or money isn't given directly to us. You have fees through PayPal and GoFundMe and things of that nature. I don't know the difference between us and them. GoFundMe, it's still a great conduit of a way to raise money and reach the vast.
But when I donate directly to your account, there's no fees. There's no fees. Yeah, exactly.
That's why I tell people, if you can mail a check to our P.O. box, it's incredible because every dollar from that check goes to that family specifically. When Oswald was killed in Fairway and their department chief and some of their command staff reached out to me, and they'd heard about us through Olathe. I believe it was Olathe. They said, hey, would you be able to open a fund for fundraising purposes? And I said, yeah, absolutely. It was open within 10 minutes because the Public Safety Credit Union is just incredible to work. They work so well with me. And in, I would say 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, we raised $224,000 for Hannah and those two little boys that never saw their daddy again. He walked out, he kissed his babies and kissed his wife and never came back home. Out serving our community. And that's what I was talking about. He stepped in front of that bullet. Didn't want to, but he did for our community. It's the least we can do. It's now our duty as a community to step in and take care of Hannah and those kids. And let me tell you, $224,000 in 3 to 4 weeks, that was a full-time job, managing that money. But I will do it again and again. I don't want to. I pray every year that our foundation never has to write a check, never has to make a donation. No family has to go through what all these other families have gone through. But I'm a realist, and our jobs are dangerous in nature, right? We know that. And we run to what people run away from. And it's just part of it.
If for those that are listening that haven't interacted, obviously with your organization before, I did see You guys are publishing pretty hard. You've got your bourbon or whiskey raffle out. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have 41 bottles that we'll be raffling off on March 7th. We'll do a Facebook Live like we did a year and a half, 2 years ago in 2022. We hosted our first one. I'm excited about it. The tickets are $10. You can buy as many as you like. But the cool thing is if you're a bourbon guy or gal, I have the entire Weller line of Wellers to include, which I'm really excited about, the big daddy of all of them, and that's the William LaRue. And so if you go to our website, which is ATC911.org, you can click up on the right and you'll see the whiskey event. You can click on it and you see all the bottles. It's on a whiskey stave that this guy custom made, and it says William LaRue Weller. And I geek out on stuff like that, man. There's not a lot of things I geek out on, but I do like a good bourbon, and bourbon starts conversation, and it's a slow. My friend Slacker with 101 The Fox said that. He's like, Ronnie, you know what I love about bourbon? I love it because it takes you a while to drink, and it makes the conversation go longer and it lasts longer. I'm like, man, I never thought of it like that, but it is a good conversation starter. So, yeah, we got 41 great allocated bottles to include that into the night prize of the entire Well line. And then, we have our golf tournament coming up on May 20th. Registration will open for that next week. Ladies Night, which was a huge hit, Singo Bingo Ladies Night, which we do at Stonehouse Winery in Lee Summit, will be June 29th. And then our big event, we brought in $120,000 last year, will be our trivia night. This is our fifth or sixth year. And that'll be the first or second week of November. I'm not sure yet because we don't have our date through Stony Creek. We have to wait for the chief schedule to come out.
Huh. I do believe too. I've even got to look it up now. We've got a Hash Browns and Harleys at Outlaw Harley Davidson for you.
We do.
And we'll put that. Obviously, we'll put your link and your dates and everything in the bio for this. Kind of, if you could summarize, especially we've talked a lot about, but for those that just don't know, they aren't in the first responder community, they don't kind of understand this. What's your message about your organization to just Joe Schmo civilian that isn't in this life like we are?
Yeah, our mission is just this. We step in to our first responders after a catastrophic severe injury and or rare and aggressive diagnosis, and we serve them. We serve those that serve us. It's pretty simple. Again, it could go down the rabbit hole of I can't believe there's not resources involved, and I try to stay away from that as much as I can. I try to educate a little bit, but I'm just like, listen, let's focus on the mission of answering the call. We are truly answering their call. They answer ours every single day. Every single day, thousands of calls go out in this community, and men and women we don't even know rush to our aid. How many lives are saved every single day in this community because men and women step up, they swear an oath, they put on a badge, they put on their bunker gear, and they rush to our aid, our community's 911 calls every single day. We are that organization that, God forbid they need our service, we are that organization that steps in and answers their call for service. It sounds kind of corny, but it's true. We answer their call for service. They don't want us there. And I tell them all the time, you guys don't want to meet me. I recognize that. I wouldn't want to meet me if I was in that uniform. But when and if you're in a situation where you're like my friend Josh, and unbeknownst to yourself, you're placed in a medically induced coma, I want you to know that there's an organization here that's going to be taking care of your family and carrying your pack temporarily. We're going to lighten your load and we're going to give it back to you. And I think that's the message I send to the community. And they have some great questions. They have a lot of it goes back to why are there not resources in place, and I just can't answer those. But I will start that conversation.
What are, this year for 2024 and going forward, what are some of your goals for answering a call?
Man, thanks for asking that. So when I early retired from the Lee Summit Police Department in 2022, December 2nd, I did it for one purpose and one reason, and that was to do more. I recognized working full-time and trying to run this organization and grow it, it just wasn't happening. A lot of my board members had conversations with me to do it full-time, and I just wasn't ready to step away or didn't feel like it was the right time. But 2022 was, I set goals for myself to be $1 million nonprofit in 5 years. So now we've got 4 to go. And I want to be more impactful. I want to walk into the JP's lives when he's laying in his hospital bed, his deathbed, truthfully, if we're honest, after given the terrible news that JP was given. And I want to be able to look him in the eyes like I did. And I want to tell him that your beautiful wife and your children will always be taken care of by this organization. I was able to tell that to my friend Michael Wells, with the lieutenant with Lenexa Fire Department. And I'll never forget this. We were on surveillance, and I was northbound on 435 at 23rd Street. My phone rang. I should not answer the phone when we're on surveillance, but Mike was calling me, and he was fighting a nasty, aggressive throat cancer. And I answered it, and he said to me, Ronnie, I've just been given the news, much like JP. I'm not going to survive my current situation. And he told me he wasn't scared of death, but he was worried and scared of leaving his wife, Katie, and their 3 kids. Quite honestly, I haven't even told Katie this, so she's going to hear this now. I haven't had the heart to do it. But I said to him, Mike, I promise you this. Your wife and kids will always be looked after as long as I'm alive. And I will always make sure that they will never need for anything financially. And it was like this, on the other end of the line, he was like this breath of fresh air came through him, and he knew it. He trusted me. And Katie and I, my wife and Katie, we've all remained in contact. I know her brother. I've met her mom and dad. Her kids come, and Katie come to the Kansas City Mavericks game with us every year on First Responder Night. And now I'm so damn honored that Katie is now one of my sitting board members. And I get that amazing woman's perspective and her heart and what she's gone through sitting on our board. And she was a huge voice for JP when that vote came up. And she said, on our text thread, she said, I know exactly what this family is going to endure financially. We have to get involved here immediately. And it was a no-brainer. Being able to provide that to these men and women, we've lost some of our recipients over the years. I stay in contact with those that I can as much as I can. Like I said before, some I've never even met. I do hear the stories of them getting back to work, and I love that. I love that a Missouri State Trooper was literally hit on New Year's standing on the side of the road doing a motorist assist at 55 miles an hour. And 3 months later, he was back on the job, and he called me on the phone. It was on the east side of the state, on the St. Louis side. And this guy called me. He's like, who the hell are you? I think the guy had only been on the job maybe a year. And he's like, this just $5,000 check just appears at my doorstep. And, I don't want to take the credit for it, but I really believe being able to, again, lighten that load and allowing him just to him and his wife, young, brand new married wife, to focus on himself, allowing her to take off work when she needed to and felt comfortable doing, because they knew there was a little bit of extra funds in their account, and they didn't have to worry about working a little extra while he was going to be off. And that's what it's all about is we want these men and women back on the job. Where they want to be. Tyler can't wait to get back on the job. He's fighting his second round of cancer. He's got a special needs daughter at home. We're fundraising right now to put an elevator in his home because the family needs it, because his sweet little wife can't carry this beautiful little girl of hers up and down the 2 flights of stairs anymore. And she's got a terrible spinal surgery coming up in July. So we're working with the elevator company to get this done. A lot of people are coming to their aid right now. And, it's a lot of just telling their story, Jamie. These stories need to be told. And, unless you hear about it on the news, you don't hear about it. But I tell people this all the time. You'll never see me, and I promise you this, you'll never see me parade any of our recipients in front of a camera or hand them a big old to-do check just for a donation. I refuse until they want to tell their story, until they want to sit down and tell their story, right? But I tell people this all the time. If you hear about it on the news, I guarantee you we're already involved. without a doubt. And that family will be taken care of, guaranteed.
For those listening, obviously, to hear these stories, want to do more, how can they?
Yeah, not everybody's wants to get in a bourbon raffle. Not everybody wants to come to a trivia night or a ladies' night single bingo or a golf tournament. So obviously we have so many different ways to donate, and all those different options are on our website, which is ATC911.org. My push last year and our big campaign, you and I have talked about this, is our $9.11 a month recurring donation. It's critical. That reoccurring donation coming in every month is critical. And my goal is to reach, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but my goal is to reach 3,000 Kansas Cityans to jump on board and, let's say, answer that call, right? And commit to that minimum $9.11 a month. You can go straight to our website. You can click on that reoccurring button. It'll take you to our PayPal account. And you can do $9.11. You can do $29.11. We have a family that does $200 a month. They have for several years. It's incredible. But if I can get 3,000 Kansas Cityans at a minimum of $9.11 a month, that's 325,000 reoccurring. And another goal that I've set for myself in 5 years is our men and women that lose their profession over their illness or injury. I want to pay their mortgage off. That's where I see us in 5 years. And there was no way of obtaining that goal still working at the police department. There just was no way. There was no way to be able to do more and step into these men and women's lives when they need it the most and take their entire situation in consideration and donate $10,000, $20,000, $25,000, knowing they're going to be off for a year. We had a Merriam officer several years back that was fighting cancer. He was off for 12 months. That's a long time to go without, just go with a minimum $40 week check, man. When your 40-hour week pay isn't what pays the bills, it's your overtime and off duty, it's your secondary job. You take a firefighter off his secondary job for an extended period of time, that's gonna be a pinch in the butt, right? So that $9.11 a month is a way for the community. It's forgettable. I mean, that is a forgettable amount. Me and my family do it. It's extremely forgettable. It comes out every month. It's a coffee a week. That's how I describe it to people.
That's about how much coffee costs now.
With inflation.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was a number that $9, it's 9/11. We think about our first responders and the heroic acts of our police officers and really specifically our firefighters on that day in September 11th. And it's just a number that resonated with me. And I felt like it was a number that most Missourians, Kansas Cityans, Kansas folks could afford. And first responders themselves. I tell guys all the time. I'm like, this is a life insurance policy for $9.11 a month that you hope you never have to use. But you know what you're getting. God forbid you need it. Your family, more importantly. Because I'm like, I can take care of myself. But somebody better damn well step in and take care of my wife and kids while I'm incapacitated. So that's who I focus on. And I was able to tell AJ that in a hospital room the day after he was shot. And I said, brother, I'm here. I'm so glad I've met you. And I want you to know I'm here for you. But you see this wife and these beautiful little kids, I'm their resource now. Anything they need above and beyond a financial help, we're here to support them. And to be able to provide that to you guys that are out there working your tails off every single day and grinding, it feels good to be able to do that for you guys. I think it helps with, I'm not going to take credit that helps with recruiting, but I think it helps, the spouses.
It helps with retention.
It helps with retention. It helps the spouses at home. I would say about 85 to 90% of our volunteers are all spouses of first responders. They know who we are and what we do. And God forbid their door gets knocked on at 3 a.m. They know that shortly thereafter, there's going to be a phone call. They're going to be meeting me, and there's going to be an envelope in my hand. And that's straight from the community saying, thank you. We're here to support you. That's what I love about it.
Well, brother, I can't thank you enough from coming on tonight. It is, for starters, your friendship has been one that I will always continue to cherish.
Yes, sir.
And as it grows, and it's just been great, especially as a younger person in this service, just learning from you, and especially in a couple of the incidents we've worked on together now, just learning everything that goes into this and how best to do it. While also, I think, humbly staying out of the picture. It's a balance, but I've learned a lot from you, and I greatly appreciate that more than you know, and greatly appreciate our friendship.
I was excited when you invited me. I think I may even invited myself, but then you accepted. To your credit, man, you do a lot in this community too, behind the scenes, and I'm grateful for that. There always has to be a Jamie Moran in the community, and somebody that isn't afraid to make that phone call and ask that question. And that's what I tell people. I received a call from a detective with Kansas City the other day, and even though we weren't able to step in the situation, she's like, "Well, I'm sorry to bother you." I said, "No, hell no. I want to be that resource. I want to be that resource that you at least reach out to, because I know people, I've met people, and it was more of a mental health side, and we can't get involved in the mental health side of it." But I was able to hopefully lead her down a path to get her coworker some assistance.
Well, I'll kind of pipe in there, Ronnie. I think you do get involved in the mental health side, because what you're able to do by going and easing that financial burden for those people, that's the first step. It takes so much probably mental pressure that they can focus that energy in other places.
Yeah, good point.
So, I mean, yeah, I know it's not your mission, but you're doing that for sure.
Yeah, I hired a grant writer last year for 3 months to kind of help us with the grant side of things. There's so many great grants out there for first responders, and I didn't know the first thing about it. And this woman came highly recommended. And at the end of our 3 months, she had this 3-page grant letter, which we're going to start submitting for grants. But during the 3 months that we would meet, she would sit down and I mean, she's written grants for multi-million-dollar foundations. We're nowhere near that, but we'll get there. I know we will. But the uniqueness and the creativity she had to put into it, because no one had ever done what we're doing. She's like, "I've never written a grant like this before. I've never written a letter like this before." But after I got her letter and I was reading through it, that's exactly what she touched on, was through her research. She did research. It showed the average income for Missouri and Kansas was extremely low for first responders throughout our 50 states. We're one of the lowest paid 2 states in the entire country. And then she also put in there that being able to assist them early on rather than later was a mental benefit to them. And, reading that and listening to AJ and remembering Josh's face when I told him we were able to take care of his family financially, it all started clicking. And we're not sitting across from the table and providing counseling, but we are providing a financial assistance that is, like you said, able to lighten that load for them and let them really kind of focus on themselves.
Well, Jeremy, any final thoughts?
Thanks for coming on. This is, it's one of those things of you.
It almost, I've got it, because when I first started talking with him, like, you're speechless. You are that civilian that goes, "How the hell has this not been getting done? What are we doing here?" And it's
and the thing is, I get it though, because it's like you said previously, whenever you were talking of, if the bureaucrats get involved, then there's red tape, and then who is actually making the decision, and how fast is that decision going to be made? And it's one of those things of, I hate it that there even has to be an organization, but at the same time, thank God it's one of us doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
It took tragedy. Unfortunately, it took my friend Josh and me being involved with him for 4 months, and his wife and his kids, to see really truly behind the scenes. When one of these situations occurs, right, people are there for 2 or 3 weeks, and everybody's there at the house, and there's all this hustle and bustle, but at some point the dust settles and all these people go away, and that family's just left to sit in that home. And every single day I would drop Melissa off at her house 5, 6 o'clock at night. I got to go home, kick my feet up and have a beer, have a conversation with my wife. Melissa walked in that door a mother of 3 kids, homework, meal, dinner, bath time, bedtime, and then she would cry herself to sleep for 4 months.
Yeah. On top of that, the stress of thinking, okay, well, is this the last meal I'm going to be able to cook for them?
Right. I mean, is my house going to go in foreclosure? And quite honestly, Dave Moore, I mentioned him earlier. He was our chaplain and good friend of mine, and he was actually one of the founding fathers of our organization. He sat down with all of the bill collectors and was just making phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call and just telling them their story. I understand they're a little late on this one, but can you give them some grace? We have this situation going on. That doesn't happen typically. Yeah. These families don't have that. So to be able to alleviate that and not have bill collectors calling them. My Sergeant John King, who's now unfortunately passed, he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He was my sergeant that brought me up from patrol to the detective unit. But if you go to our website and you watch one of our videos, John's on there. It was actually the last thing he ever did before he passed. He was on his deathbed. He drug himself into FOP Lodge 50 and did that video for us because he wanted to, because of the impact we made on his wife and his family and his kids and himself. But he said that. He said, you don't have the bill collectors calling you because you have an organization that's stepping in and keeping them at bay. And, hearing those stories, it's I don't like going to the hospital. Who wants to? Who wants to have to go see these horrible scenes? But it was impactful to me to walk into AJ's room and tell him, brother, I got you and these 2 kids and this beautiful wife. We're going to take care of them. Going into JP's room, knowing that days later he wasn't going to be with us, been able to provide him a little glimpse of hope on his last couple days on this planet after all the years of service and all the things he did for this community, and provide a service to his wife and his kids, a financial one. I think it alleviates a little bit of stress from the situation. I mean, I know it does. And that's all credit to our community just coming to their aid through us.
It's still, I will always just be, it's one of the most humbling things I've ever interacted with. Ronnie, brother, any final thoughts for our viewers tonight?
Thank you guys for having me. The community of Kansas City, honestly, I say it all the time and I probably don't say it enough, but just thank you guys for believing in us, believing in our organization. Thank you for supporting the men and women that serve and protect us. I'm just so grateful for the Kansas City community coming out and supporting us and allowing us the opportunity, allowing me the opportunity to step into these heroes' lives at their most critical time. I'm just grateful, extremely.
Well, brother, thanks for stopping by. For those listening again, ATC911.org. If you want to donate, get on that $9.11 reoccurring donation. Like the events we talked about tonight, those are going to be up. If you'd like to volunteer and help out with those, reach out to that website. That's going to be the way to do it. Guys, as we talk about every episode, if you are struggling, reach out. This is just another example of all the ways that there are assistance and there is help out there. All right. There are so many different methods, so many different ways to find the help you guys need. As always, thank you for stopping by the Washdown Podcast. Have a great night.